Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Franchise Hockey Manager 9 playthrough of the Chicago Blackhawks. We are at the start of the 2023 offseason. The Blackhawks in our first season were respectable. We went 41-36-5. Only actually missed the playoffs by a couple of points. Our goal was to just not finish last, so from that perspective, the season on the ice was definitely a success. That said, we are in a definite rebuild and would have preferred to be a little worse than we were to give us a few more balls in the hopper, so to speak, when it comes to the upcoming lottery for the upcoming draft. We've got that in the next few days, but we're also kicking off free agency. The good thing is that we traded away many of our more expensive players, including Captain Jonathan Toews. So we did re-sign Patrick Kane, so we've got him for the next 4 years at a pretty reasonable amount. And we made a trade right before the trade deadline to bring on Bo Horvat, who we also signed for a pretty reasonable amount. So we've got a lot of money to potentially spend right now in free agency. And we've jumped right in and made 3 key offers: goalie Mackenzie Blackwood, center Dylan Larkin, and left wing Ross Colton. 3-year deals for Blackwood and Colton and a 6-year proposed deal for Larkin. Don't know if we'll get all of those players, but certainly need to upgrade our goaltending. Larkin is the best player who's available in free agency this year. 26-year-old, $6.5 million doesn't seem excessive to us to add another potentially dynamic scorer. And Ross Colton is more of a solid, good NHL player, which we can use. So not making a real long-term commitment to him if the deal even goes through. We've also made offers to a couple of younger prospects, just trying to round out our system. And then also Lucas Reichel, who's one of the top prospects in our organization, spent most of the last 2 seasons in Rockford. We've offered him an extension to try to ensure that by the time he's really NHL ready, he's still going to be doing it for the Blackhawks. We also spent some money replenishing our coaching and scouting staffs. Added Benoit Allaire, excellent goaltending coach, very good with prospects. I think he's an upgrade there. And then also added a defensive coach who is hopefully going to help take our defense to the next level, because we don't have incredible blue liners right now. So hopefully with some coaching, we'll get more out of who we do have. Did also add some additional scouts. We've got, at this point, excellent coverage of the entire world. So don't really need to add too much there. But I did notice that there's still players out there that we don't have a great take on as far as scouting, particularly in the some of the Canadian juniors even, which is a little bit surprising. So we added a couple more really good scouts in Canada. Going to obviously pay a little bit more attention to where we're scouting and who we're putting on our watch lists. But you can see even here, Ryan Spooner, granted he's coming from the KHL, but a pretty established player that our scouts claim to know nothing about. Similarly with Okolov, also from the KHL. So looks like it's mostly KHL players but not all, as far as the free agents that we don't know as much about as we'd like to. Similarly, I think I've focused our attention on some of the top prospects. So hopefully with our 2 first-rounders, we're going to have a really good idea of who we potentially bring on board in the draft in a few days. But need to do a better job scouting, and some of that I think is just the number and quality of scouts, which hopefully we've addressed a little bit this offseason. And then some of it is obviously more proactive activities from me as far as our watch list and as far as our prioritization of where we want to be spending our time. And we've gotten decent responses from Blackwood, Larkin, and Colton. They all kind of say that our offers are looking good, either that or we're the favorites or leaders of the pack. Serious about signing them. So hopefully if there's another offer on the table, that means that at least we'll hear back from them, but would certainly love to get at least 2 of these guys and hopefully all 3 signed. I think that could definitely jumpstart our rebuild with a more professional goalie as our starter and a couple of productive forwards, including Larkin, who I think is a potentially dynamic player, certainly the best player that's available in free agency this year. Well, we've simmed ahead now to the draft lottery. Haven't heard back from any of the big players that we're after. We did get defenseman Tague Harding signed. He's really just organizational depth, a bit of a prospect. It looks like he's a player that was with Providence, 3rd round pick of ours back in 2021, and now it's time to bring him on and see what he can do at the professional level. And I had mentioned that we had just missed the playoffs. I didn't realize that we were the closest team as possible to making the playoffs. So obviously anything except any improvement at all is a win for us. If we don't see ourselves show up in the 16 hole for the draft, that is a victory. As I talked about a lot during previous episodes on the regular season, we had our number 1, and we will have the Lightning's number 1 this year. They ended up sneaking into the playoffs. So at one point, it looked like we could have 2 top 10-ish kind of picks, even probably back in February. And then Lightning got hot and made the playoffs. We got relatively hot and just missed the playoffs. So we're not going to have quite as much draft capital as we may have hoped a few months ago. And not surprisingly, we are still in the 16 hole. So makes it a lot less interesting to me. The other teams that I was thinking about doing in this playthrough are the Coyotes, who are likely to be number 1, and the Islanders, who are likely to be in the top 10. So with the modest success that we had on the ice last year, a little more difficult for the rebuild when we're going to be picking 16th and probably around 20th in the draft this year. But if there's a player we really like, we'll still do what we can to try to go up and get him. Ooh, and the Islanders and the Ducks both get ahead of the Coyotes. That's definitely a bummer for Coyotes fans. And we still haven't heard from any of the big free agents, although supposedly with Blackwood, Larkin, and Colton, we are the top team involved at this point. Doesn't mean that can't change. And at the draft, we are picking 16th and 20th in the first round, so pretty much exactly as expected. And second round, we've got... is it Tampa Bay's? It must be Tampa Bay's pick that we also have in the second round. I knew we had an extra second rounder. Didn't know exactly whose it was. So we've got some ammo to go up a little bit if we want to. The big question is going to be, do we want to take 2 pretty good prospects, hopefully at 16 and 20, or try to move up somewhere into the top 10 and maybe try to take someone who we think's a little bit more of a franchise-changing type of player for us. And Connor Bedard certainly seems like the star of the draft. He's had 2 huge seasons back-to-back in the WHL at this point. I would assume he's expected to be the number 1 overall pick for the Islanders, of course. We might as well check in with them. I can't imagine that they're going to be willing to deal him away to us, but we can give it a try. And not surprisingly, there's no way that we're going to be able to go up and get Bedard. We offered them our 2 first-round picks this year, our 2 first-round picks next year, and Mackenzie Entwistle, who's a pretty solid young player, and still no way that they would accept the offer. I didn't think there was a chance, but I figured we had 2 first-rounders, might as well try to shoot our shot while we can. So I think we'll probably let the first 7 or 8 picks go off the board, and then maybe try to engage with somebody else if we want to move up a little bit. Would assume that Bedard and Michkov are going to go 1 and 2, but certainly no guarantees about that. Jaeger, Danielson could definitely go high as well. Not surprisingly, Bedard to the Islanders. Quentin Musty to the Ducks. Jaeger third. Danielson. Looks like there may be some trepidation about the Russian player. I guess there's certainly no guarantee that he'll end up coming over here, particularly with the current political environment. But he still went number 5 to the Blue Jackets. So, I mean, according to our scouts, looking at potential, there's still some 4.5-star kind of prospects on the table. Unfortunately, for some reason, it's a little weird. As I mentioned, our scouting hasn't been optimal. You would think that a guy who's been in the WHL for the past 3 years, a NHL team would have a pretty good scouting report on Matthew Ward, but we don't, unfortunately. Unlikely that he'll be around for us at 16 anyways, and I guess since we don't know much about him, it would be hard to convince me that we need to go up and try to get him. And it looks like we should have a pick of a few players probably that our scouts think have 4-star potential at least, but the top talent, or the potentially exceptional talent, will definitely be off the board by the time we're getting ready to pick. And we've simmed through to our pick at number 16, and a couple of the players that look like they may have a little more upside are still there. Now, they're both foreign players, the German in the case of Hauff, and then Marcus Samenas of Sweden. I'm going to take a good look now through all of the prospects that are kind of available at this point, because we've got 2 of the next 5 picks. Would be nice to bring in some players who can make a difference on our team for the future. And I think we've made our decision for the 16th pick in the draft, and if you look carefully at what is available here among the top prospects, you might know which direction I'm going, since I like to try to build a solid defense. I'm going to go with Luke Coughlin, Canadian prospect. He was actually he's ranked as the 4th North American skater, and if you look at the mock draft, he was expected to go 6th to the Kings, and I'd prefer if we thought he was going to be a little stronger with some of the defensive ratings. Obviously, he should be growing and improving on these over time, but his role as a quarterback definitely looks like he could be a pretty interesting distributor of the puck for a blue liner. Pretty good physical ratings. His mental is okay at this point, but he still is only 18 years old. Not that big, but there's just not a lot of defensemen there. I think we'll get a pick of just about any of these forwards. Obviously, at number 6 or number 20 in our second number 1 pick, but I think that Coughlin could definitely be a pretty significant contributor as a kind of offensive oriented defenseman down the line. So we're going to go ahead and pick him at number 16. And moving on until our next pick. Still got some decisions to make. And for our 20th pick, I'm a little intrigued by the higher potential foreign players, Luca Hoff and Marcus Domenis. Hoff in particular has got a interesting scouting report. They say he can be similar to Patrick Kane in terms of his overall skill, which is obviously very attractive. But it does seem like there's a chance that one of these guys could slide to the second round. It seems like there's definitely a reticence to take some of the foreign players in the draft thus far. And I'm intrigued by Matteo Rotundi. Granted, it's another left defenseman at this point. Our scouts aren't quite as high on him as consensus, but very clean prospect. High IQ, gets along well with everyone, handles criticism constructively. Think he can potentially turn into a pretty valuable player. He's number 9 among the North American skater rankings. We're potentially getting him at number 20. You look at the mock draft, and again, it's probably not perfect, but he went 13th in the mock draft, and we're potentially getting him at 20. I think there's good value there, and there's no way that he's going to be around when we come back in the second round. I do think there is a remote chance that Hauff or Semenius is. So because of that, we're going to go defenseman and defenseman with the 16th and 20th picks in the draft and move on to our 2 second-round picks. And Semenius is still around. We were less interested in him than Hauff, but definitely worth taking a look now. You can see of the 4-star or better potential players that are left, there's 2 Canadians, the Swede, Russian, and a Slovakian. Our scouts really like Semenius, but he was not incredibly productive in the QMJHL last year. A little prone to controversy. Not that that's not a reason to pick him. He's also still predicted to be number 99 in the mock draft, so although he stands out a little bit, at least according to our scouts, his productivity in the juniors doesn't jump off the page to me. He's pretty young and he's pretty raw, but it seems a little aggressive to me to grab him right now. And I think we're going to stay a little closer to home and go with Antonin Verreau in the second round with our first pick of the second round. Pretty good personality. And he was pretty productive this past year in the QMJHL, which was good to see. Doesn't jump off the page as a prospect, but I think he's a player who could definitely be a contributor in the NHL down the line with a chance to become a pretty good player. So we're going to go with him. Move on to our next pick. And Semenius did go right after our pick to the Sabres. I was thinking about trying to potentially pick him up with the next pick, but obviously that is no longer possible. And even here in the late second round, the pickings are getting a bit slim. Going to go with Julien Hébert, another Canadian junior player here in the second round. And then we don't have any third rounders because we traded both of those away in the trade that bring Mr. Horvat to us. So given that we were able to get him signed to a 5-year extension, I think that was still a really good trade, particularly given that at this point in the draft there's not a ton of talent around anymore. Actually, one of the third rounders we traded him must have been for next season. So we do have a third rounder this year. But we did trade 2 third rounders. But I guess one was probably a 23 and one was probably a 24. So I have been looking at this guy, Ruslan Gazizov. He has been pretty productive in the OHL. He only speaks Russian at this point, which isn't optimal. Scouting report is definitely mixed on him. Not going to be well liked, not particularly smart, but he still could turn out to be a better player than Bo Horvat, according to our scouts. For a third rounder, he doesn't seem like a horrible guy to go after. We also have been looking a bit in the past at Peter Repchik. Obviously, those are the only 2 4-star potential players according to our scouts left. Repchik also the potential to be a Bo Horvat kind of player. Repchik was 131 in the mock draft. Gazizov was 72. So I guess theoretically there's a chance that we could get them both. If we take Gazivov here at pick 80, maybe Repchik is still around next round. We're just kind of trying to take players with some level of upside at this point. Joey Vetrano is another guy that we've looked at back and forth with our last pick or two. Hasn't been incredibly productive in the major juniors at this point, but he's still young. Pretty good personality, upside of him, similar to everyone, is a Bo Horvat kind of player. He was expected to be pick number 57, so I would think we're getting to the point where it's unlikely that he'll be around much longer. I think we will go with Vetrano just because there's a better chance, I think, that Gazizov or Repchik, most likely Repchik, will be around when we pick next. So we're going to go with Vetrano here in the third. And both of those guys are gone here now that we're picking. Ooh, and it's still in the third. So I guess we must have traded both of our third round draft picks in 24 and or 25. I wasn't paying a lot of attention when we made the trade for Horvat, but clearly we've got actually, no, are we in the 4th round now? We may just have the, yeah, because that was the 96th pick. Yeah, if I could look at what's right in front of me, it would tell me. So we did have that third rounder, and now we have Arizona's 4th rounder. So it's a 4th round pick, but we are right at the top of the 4th round with our next selection. And probably won't bore you with all of the details on this going forward, since it's getting less and less likely that any of these players are going to be having a big impact on our team down the line. All right, the draft is over, and according to the press, we're not among the worst drafts, and we're not among the best drafts. So I guess we're right in the meaty middle part of the performance on our 2023 NHL draft. Do kind of have good feelings that some of those defensemen we took in the first round could become pretty useful players for us down the line. And then if one of the forwards develops that we were taken in kind of the second, third, fourth rounds, that could be good. We also grabbed a goalie near the end just to take a prospect, and it is what it is. Wasn't the most exciting draft in the world, as I mentioned. We and the Lightning both ended up outperforming expectations, so weren't picking quite as high as we had hoped. Obviously had no chance at Connor Bedard, but we've got some new talent into the Blackhawks system, so that's progress. And with the draft behind us, potentially a huge day today in the history of the Blackhawks franchise. Mackenzie Blackwood, Dylan Larkin, and Ross Colton have all signed with us. Also signed a few of the younger players that happen to be available that we were looking at. So feel like we've made pretty significant progress. The draft yesterday hopefully helps us for the long term. And then the additions of Larkin and Colton should help our offense, and the addition of Blackwood should definitely help our defense. So feeling good about this start to free agency. We got all three of our top targets, including the guy that we thought was the best player out there in Dylan Larkin. So we actually still have some money to spend at this point, close to $10 million. But probably going to be much quieter now since we've had a very busy first month of July. And obviously the transfer summary and the team value gained is a pretty rudimentary system because we've added 3 big-time players, in our opinion, letting go potentially players who aren't quite as good, although we haven't officially lost them yet. But still says that we're minus 17 in terms of the value that we've generated this offseason by moving on from kind of a lot of mediocre players. Clearly, Anaheim has added 3 players already, and they only had 2 players that were lost, so that's why they look so good. We've got a lot, as you can see, of kind of meh players that we are potentially moving on from. So although we've got 13 players that we're moving on from, and we've only added a handful so far, still feel like the offseason is off to a really good start. Very interested in seeing what our team is going to potentially look like with 2 pretty good centers in Horvat and Larkin, who can both definitely put the puck into the net. We've got Colton Dock, who will be up with us at some point, probably not quite this year, but he's certainly getting closer. Kane will end up playing on the first line, obviously, with either Larkin or Horvat, depending on what we decide to do there. Still feel like we can improve our wings a little bit. The addition of Colton will definitely help. He's certainly in the mix, I think, to be on our first line at this point. So I think that was a big addition. And then clearly the addition of Blackwood, just simply looking at his 15 goalie and his 15 mental aggregations, definitely better than Copley, and potentially mentally even stronger than Stolar. So now we've got those 2 guys both signed for 3 years at about a little over $7 million between them. We'll have Copley in the AHL if nobody grabs him from us when we waive him eventually, assuming that there's no injuries, as kind of a potential backup. So I wouldn't say that our goalie situation right now is great, but I would say that it's at least respectable, whereas when we took this team over about 10 months ago, it was honestly kind of disastrous with Mrazek and Stalock. Stalock just old and past his prime, and Mrazek I don't think was as good as Stolar, so he'd be the 3rd goalie on the team right now if we hadn't traded him away. So I think we've made some progress in the early stages of free agency. Where we've got to do some work is our defenders. You can see we've got a lot of left defensemen on the roster now, with players who are likely going to be back with their junior teams or in the ECHL or the AHL in many cases on our roster right now. But the overall quality of our defense is not incredible. Have gotten interesting feedback from around the world sports about trying to get out from under this Seth Jones contract, which I agree. He's certainly our most talented overall defenseman, but he is a player that we do have a commitment to into his mid-30s at this point at a pretty high price point. And there are teams that would take him. Don't know how much we're going to get for him given that contract, and think I'll probably, given that he's still, in his late 20s right now, and we've got tons of cap room, keep him around this next season most likely and see how the Blackhawks are able to progress with a full season from Horvat, the addition of Larkin, the addition of Colton, and now Blackwood and goalie. I feel like we've added some talent that for the Blackhawks is pretty high-end talent over the last couple days in free agency, and then obviously before the trade deadline with the addition of Bo Horvat. So I feel like we're starting to move the team in the right direction, given that we were so close to a playoff spot this year. Would think that with the initial moves that we've made, should definitely be in the mix to be a playoff team in the upcoming season. But there's still a lot that can change between now and then. There's still a lot that we need to improve. And obviously how well this rebuild goes is going to be still even more dependent probably on acquiring and developing top prospects in our system than just trying to pick up players through free agency. And we've still got a lot of work to do on that front. So with that, it's been a pretty eventful 7 days to begin here in July. We're going to call it an episode. In our next one, we'll be back and we'll go through all of the rest of the offseason and get ready to drop the puck on the 23 to 24 season with the Chicago Blackhawks. Until then, thanks so much for watching and hope you have a great day.